The Cathedral of Florence, Santa Maria del Fiore, stands magnificent in the morning sun, its vast dome complete but its marble facade still unfinished, bare brick showing where panels should be. Inside, the air is thick with incense and the murmur of prayer. It's the 26th of April, and the city's elite have gathered for High Mass. Among them, two brothers, Lorenzo and Giuliano de Medici. They kneel as the priest raises the host, the most sacred moment of the liturgy, when bread becomes flesh, when the divine touches the mortal world. The bell rings, and then the killing begins. Francesco de Pazzi lunges at Giuliano with a dagger. The first thrust goes deep. Giuliano staggers. He tries to rise. Francesco stabs again, and again. 19 times in total, with such fury that he drives the blade into his own leg. Giuliano collapses on the cathedral floor, blood pooling beneath the pews, spreading across the sacred stones. Across the nave, two priests, Stefano da Bagnona and Antonio Maffei, close in on Lorenzo. They're awkward with their weapons, trembling. Lorenzo feels the blade slice his neck. He spins and draws his own sword. He vaults over the altar rail and crashes through the sacristy doors. His friends slam the heavy bronze shut. Inside, in the darkness, Antonio Ridolfi puts his mouth to Lorenzo's wound and sucks, terrified the dagger was poisoned. Outside, the cathedral erupts into chaos, screaming, bodies scrambling over pews. And at the altar, in front of the raised host, Giuliano de Medici lies dying in a spreading lake of his own blood. This is not the Renaissance you learned about in school. This is the story of the Medici family, not the benevolent patrons of art and culture from the postcards and museum labels, but the real Medici, a clan of merchants, bankers and political operators who clawed their way from mountain villages to the throne of Florence and the seat of St. Peter himself. This is the story of the family who built their fortune on usury, lending money at interest, a mortal sin, and laundered their guilt through chapels and frescoes. The family who manipulated elections, exiled rivals, and crushed rebellions, who commissioned Botticelli and Michelangelo while hanging archbishops from palace windows. This is a story about money and power, about how wealth becomes legitimacy, about the machinery behind the Golden Age, about what happens when a family that should have been shopkeepers decides to become kings. And it begins not in the marble halls of the Palazzo Medici, but in the mud and chaos of medieval Florence, a city tearing itself apart. Florence in the 14th century is a city of extremes. Breathtaking beauty and overwhelming squalor pressed together in narrow streets. The Duomo rises, its vast marble panels shipped at ruinous cost from Carrara. The wool trade has made the city rich, mechanized looms, dye vats, the rhythmic clatter of industry echoing off stone walls. But the people are divided. There are the grandi, the old noble families, descendants of feudal lords, and there are the popolo, merchants, artisans, bankers. The Medici are firmly popolo, and not even the respectable kind. They don't come from the city. They crawl out of the Mugello, a rough agricultural valley north of Florence. They aren't knights. They are farmers who migrate to Florence looking for a buck. Even their name smells of trade. Medici, the doctors. Look at their coat of arms, the famous shield with the red bulls, the palais. Later, court poets will invent heroic legends about it, claiming the bulls represent dents in a shield earned by a giant-slaying ancestor named Averardo. It's all nonsense. The bulls are likely symbols of an apothecary's trade, pills, or perhaps cupping glasses used to draw blood. Or they could be coins, borrowed from the coat of arms of the Guild of Moneylenders. The Medici didn't start as bankers. The name suggests they started as village medics, peddling cures in the mud of the Mugello. When they finally arrive in Florence in the 12th century, they are viewed as country bumpkins. They are aggressive, violent, and desperate to prove they belong. They muscle their way into the wool guild, the Arte della Lana. They lend money on the street corners, setting up a banca, a wooden bench, in the marketplace, the literal origin of the word bank. If they go broke, the authorities smash the bench. Bancarotta, bankrupt. The city they step into has been tearing itself apart for a century. First, it's the Guelphs against the Ghibellines, papal supporters against imperial loyalists. A civil war fought tower by tower, street by street. The Medici pick a side. They are staunch Guelphs. By the 1250s, the Guelphs hold the city. The Florentine Republic is born, and the gold florin is minted, a coin so pure it becomes the dollar of the Middle Ages. But peace doesn't last. In the absence of an enemy, the victors turn on each other. In 1301, the Guelph party splits into rival gangs, the blacks and the whites. It's a savage internal purge. The Medici, minor players then, pick the winning side. The blacks. The poet Dante, a prominent white Guelph, is caught on the wrong side and exiled forever. He writes the Inferno in bitterness, placing usurers in the 7th circle of hell, burning forever in sand with heavy purses hung around their necks, a pointed insult to the bankers of Florence. The violence continues for decades. Then, in the 1340s, Florence's great banking dynasties, the Bardi and the Peruzzi, collapse under the weight of their unpaid loans to Edward III. Their political influence evaporates with them. And in the turmoil that follows, the 1343 uprising that topples the Duke of Athens, a space opens for new men, new families. The Medici are not yet the masters of Florence, but they are beginning to move quietly into the vacuum left by the old elites. Then comes 1378 and the Ciompi revolt. The Ciompi are the wool workers at the bottom of the economic ladder, the men who card and comb and dye the fabric that makes Florence rich. They belong to no guild. They have no political voice. Their work fills their lungs with fibres and their hands with chemical burns. And one summer, they've had enough. They storm the Palazzo della Signoria, the seat of government, and demand representation. Salvestro de' Medici, a distant relative of the later ruling line, opportunistically aligns himself with the lower guilds. It is a calculated gamble. The revolt is eventually crushed, but the impression lingers. There are Medici who stand with the people. It's populism as strategy, and it works. This is the world Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici inherits, a city shaped by violence, class conflict, and the ever-present threat that the mob might rise again. Giovanni learns the lesson well. In Florence, power does not come from force. It comes from being useful, from making yourself indispensable. He starts small. Giovanni is born around 1360, one of 5 brothers, to a family with modest means. No great fortune, no estates. He works his way up in his uncle Vieri's bank, learning the rhythms of credit and debt, the networks that stretch across Europe. When Vieri retires, Giovanni opens his own institution in 1397, and he makes one crucial innovation. He moves the headquarters from Rome to Florence. It may not sound revolutionary, but think about what a bank is in the 14th century. It's not just a place to store money, it's an intelligence network. Every transaction is recorded, every debt, every loan, every trade route. Giovanni's ledgers don't just track florins, they track secrets. Who owes whom, who's desperate, who's ambitious, who can be bought. And he's careful, painfully careful. Other bankers make the fatal mistake of lending to kings and princes, men who can simply refuse to pay and dare you to collect. Giovanni bans it. Notoriously bad investments, he says. Let the competitors go bankrupt chasing royal debts. Instead, Giovanni bets on the church. The papacy has been exiled in Avignon for decades, a humiliating captivity under the thumb of French kings. But Giovanni sees it coming, the return to Rome. When Pope Martin V finally settles back in the Eternal City in 1417, the Medici Bank is waiting. They become the Pope's personal treasury. They collect tithes, 10% of every Christian's income, under penalty of excommunication. They manage tax farming contracts. The money floods in. But Giovanni knows money alone isn't enough. Wealth breeds envy. Envy breeds violence. So he hides it. He dresses plainly. He eats simply. He rides a mule instead of a horse. He writes to his sons, "Do not draw public attention on yourselves." When Giovanni dies in 1429, he's one of the richest men in Florence, but most people barely know his name. His son Cosimo will not be so lucky. Cosimo de' Medici is 44 when his father dies. He spent his entire adult life in the bank, learning the family business, expanding the network, deepening the connections. He's quiet, deliberate, inscrutable. People say he rarely speaks, that he answers questions with proverbs, that you can never quite tell what he's thinking. Behind this Sphinx-like exterior, Cosimo is playing a different game entirely. Florence is still, nominally, a republic. The government is the Signoria, 9 men, selected by lottery every 2 months from leather bags filled with the names of eligible citizens. It's supposed to be fair, democratic, and immune to corruption. Cosimo doesn't try to abolish it. Instead, he just rigs it. He uses the accoppiatori, officials tasked with filling the bags, to ensure that only friendly names go in. He uses the balia, emergency councils with extraordinary powers, to bypass constitutional constraints. He uses the bank to create a web of debtors who can't afford to see the Medici fall. He builds a faction, a parte, bound by patronage and fear. The Roman scholar Aeneas Sylvius, later Pope Pius II, said that political questions are settled in Cosimo's house. The man he chooses holds office. He is who decides peace and war. He is king in all but name. By 1433, Cosimo's wealth and influence have grown so vast that Florence's old aristocracy, the Albizzi family and their allies, decide he's too dangerous to live. They arrest him on charges of plotting against the Republic. They imprison him in a cell high in the tower of the Palazzo della Signoria. Cosimo knows what comes next. He knows about the poisoning of previous prisoners, the quiet murders disguised as accidents. He refuses to eat. For days, he starves himself until a trusted friend shares a meal with him to prove it's safe. But the Albizzi make a fatal mistake. They hesitate. They exile Cosimo instead of executing him. They let him take his bank with him to Venice, to Padua, to anywhere but Florence. Within a year, Florence's economy is in ruins. The papal accounts are frozen. Trade networks collapse. The city, desperate, begs Cosimo to return. He does. In 1434, Cosimo de' Medici rides back into Florence in triumph, and the moment he arrives, the purge begins. The Albizzi are exiled, their property is confiscated, their allies are hunted down, one by one, and driven from the city. This is a conquest, not a restoration. Cosimo doesn't need to wear a crown or sit on a throne. He simply ensures that no decision, no appointment, no contract happens without his approval. The Palazzo della Signoria is the seat of official government, but the Republic didn't just project power through stone. Power was alive. In a cage right beside the palace, The government kept live lions, the traditional symbols of authority. Crowds gathered to watch them, marveling that the cubs were born alive, not dead like they say in the bestiaries. If the lions thrived, the city thrived. It was a superstition, but for the Medici, it was a lesson. If you want to rule the mob, you have to entertain them. Bread and circuses. But real power now resides in the Palazzo Medici, the private residence Cosimo builds next to his family's ancestral home. As the later Pope Pius II describes it, a palace fit for a king. It's slightly larger than other palaces, but not ostentatiously so. Cosimo knows better. The palace is built from the ground up, instead of building from what's already present, as was usual. The facade is plastered with Medici symbols, the palla, the balls of the family crest, on every window, every torch holder, a reminder of exactly who owns the city. Inside, the halls are always crowded. Citizens come to ask favours, to settle disputes, to request tax relief, to negotiate marriages. They don't go to the signoria anymore. Why would they? The real government is here, in Cosimo's courtyard, in his private chambers, in the quiet rooms where deals are made and fortunes are decided. Cosimo doesn't flaunt it. He continues to dress plainly. He dines with his servants on feast days. He plays chess after supper. He prunes his own vines every February. The later Pope Pius II notes with grudging respect, Cosimo was more cultured than merchants usually are. Cosimo reads voraciously, but he can't switch off the banker in his brain. When he finds a passage in a philosophy book that he likes, something about managing a state or the evils of envy, he doesn't just underline it. He marks it with 3 dots arranged in a triangle. It's the exact same symbol his bank managers use to authenticate financial documents. To Cosimo, Plato and profit are just 2 sides of the same ledger, and the ledger is overflowing. Under Cosimo's guidance, the bank secures a monopoly on paper alum, a mineral essential for setting dyes in the textile industry. With the discovery of alum deposits at Tolfa, the Medici suddenly control one of the most vital commodities in Europe's economy. It is a license to print money. When the Bishop of Orta visits the city and remarks, "It's a pity such a beautiful woman does not have a husband," the Pope replies, "Yes, but she has a lover." He means Cosimo, and Cosimo knows exactly how to keep his lover loyal. He commissions art, vast, expensive, public art, not just for beauty, for control. He funds Brunelleschi's completion of the Duomo's dome, an engineering miracle. He pays for Donatello's sculptures, including a bronze David, the first freestanding male nude since antiquity, which he places in his private courtyard. David, the underdog, the slayer of Goliath. It's the symbol of Republican Florence, of liberty against tyranny. And Cosimo has taken it for himself, placed it in his garden, where only invited guests can see it. He founds the Platonic Academy, paying scholars to translate Plato from Greek, establishing Florence as the center of humanist learning. He builds churches, chapels, libraries. All of it serves 2 purposes. It launders the sin of usury, and it cements the Medici name into the very fabric of the city. Because there's a problem with banking. According to the church, lending money at interest is a mortal sin. Dante put usurers in hell. Cosimo knows this. He also knows that the only way to avoid hell, or at least to hedge his bets, is to give the money away, to God, to the church, to the city. So he pours a fortune into the convent of San Marco. He hires the devout Dominican friar, Fra Angelico, to decorate the walls. But this isn't just public relations. It is a desperate attempt to balance the spiritual books. Cosimo reserves a private cell for himself in the monks' dormitory, cell 38. It is a double cell, larger than the others, but sparse, deliberately austere. a room for the wealthiest man in Florence to play monk. Here, the art isn't about glory. Fra Angelico paints frescoes designed for solitary meditation. They are quiet, almost minimalist. In the corridors and cells, Fra Angelico's frescoes focus intensely on Christ's suffering, blood gushing from wounds, dripping onto the ground. It is a stark, graphic reminder of the cost of salvation. Cosimo retreats here to pray, to escape the banker in his brain, to beg for forgiveness. But even in his piety, he can't quite let go of the ego. In Fra Angelico's San Marco altarpiece, the church's high altar, the figure of St. Cosmas, the Medici patron saint, bears Cosimo's own face kneeling before the Virgin. He is humble, but he makes sure God knows exactly who signed the check. Then, years later, the humility vanishes entirely. In the Palazzo Medici, Benozzo Gozzoli paints the Chapel of the Magi, a private chapel, intimate, glowing with gold leaf. The walls show the procession of the three kings travelling through a Tuscan landscape to worship the Christ child. While the elder kings bear the faces of foreign emperors, the young king rides ahead on a white horse, a golden-haired, idealized prince often seen as a symbolic reflection of the young Lorenzo de Medici. But the true dynasty rides in the cavalcade behind. There is the aging patriarch Cosimo riding a humble mule. Beside him is his son Piero, and mingling in the crowd are Piero's own sons, the actual Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano, stamping the Medici face on the city's future. It's propaganda, pure and simple, but it's beautiful propaganda, and in Florence, beauty is currency. By the time Cosimo dies in 1464, he's transformed the city. Visitors marvel at the art, the architecture, the libraries. Pope Pius II calls him king in all but name. The Florentines officially call him Pater Patriae, father of the fatherland. But there are others who whisper a different truth, that Cosimo destroyed the Republic, that he turned citizens into subjects, that the lottery system is a sham, that elections are rigged, that the Signoria is a puppet government. They are, of course, right. But by the time they realize it, it's too late. Cosimo's son Piero inherits the bank and the city, but he's dealt a difficult hand. He's plagued by gout, the same disease that killed his father. He's often bedridden, unable to walk, his joints swollen and agonizing. The Florentines call him Piero the Gouty, but don't mistake physical weakness for political incompetence. Tension is rising in Florence. After the death of Cosimo, the opponents of Medici rule have come out into the open. Chief among them is Luca Pitti. Cosimo's system of controlling elections is waning. Citizens go to the Palazzo Pitti to talk government affairs, not to the Palazzo Medici. The year 1466, 2 years into the rule of Piero the Gouty, begins with a flood of the River Arno, a bad omen. Prominent citizens gather to swear an oath to uphold the original constitution, to protect the Republic. That summer, this faction of Florence's elite sees its chance. Luca Pitti, Niccolo Sodrini, and Diotti Salvi Neroni, men who resented Cosimo and now smell blood, organize a coup. They plan to seize the Palazzo della Signoria, exile the Medici, and restore the Republic. Piero, carried through the streets on a litter because he cannot walk, rallies his supporters. He calls in armed men from the countryside. The conspirators panic, hesitate, fragment. More importantly, he engages in secret talks with the leader of the opposing faction, Luca Pitti. Luca must betray his co-conspirators, and in exchange, he will be awarded with a Medici husband for his daughter. Piero crushes the attempted coup. The ringleaders are exiled. Their property is confiscated. Medici influence over the mechanisms of election is restored. It's the Medici method again. Survive the crisis, then purge your enemies. But Piero's health continues to fail. He alienates some of his father's old partners. He makes financial decisions that strain the already burdened bank. By 1469, after only 5 years in power, he's dying. On the 2nd of December of that year, Piero the Gouty dies. His sons are dangerously young. Lorenzo is 20, Giuliano is 16. They're too young, too inexperienced. The old families see an opening. Surely now, finally, the Republic can be restored. Surely the Medici grip will weaken. They are wrong. Lorenzo di Piero de' Medici is unlike his father and grandfather. Where they were cautious, he is bold. Where they hid their wealth, he flaunts it. Where they dressed as merchants, he dresses and acts like a prince. He's not conventionally handsome. His nose is flat, broken in a childhood accident. His voice is high-pitched, nasal. He has no sense of smell. But he has charisma, athleticism, poetic brilliance. He rides in jousts, wins tournaments, composes sonnets in the Tuscan vernacular. He transforms himself into a character, a performance, Il Magnifico, Lorenzo the Magnificent. And Florence, starved for spectacle, eats it up. Lorenzo organizes festivals on a scale the city has never seen. The celebrations for San Giovanni in 1470 last 7 days. Jousts, mock battles, parades through the streets. He commissions canti carnasialeschi, carnival songs, and sings them himself from elaborate floats. His most famous is the Triumph of Bacchus and Ariadne, a hymn to youth and pleasure. How beautiful is youth, which flees nevertheless. Let him who wants to be happy be so. Of tomorrow there is no certainty. It sounds like poetry. It is poetry, but it's also political anesthesia. Don't worry about the Constitution. Don't worry about your lost freedoms. Enjoy the moment, seize the day. Tomorrow is uncertain. But beneath the poetry, the Florentine street spirit remained crude and practical. While Lorenzo sang of youth, the chronicler Benedetto Dei was recording the real proverbs of the marketplace. His advice for a good life wasn't about seizing the day. It was shit well and piss clear and jeer at the doctor. That was the grounding reality Lorenzo was trying to paint over with gold leaf. The crowds cheer, they dance, they drink, and while they're distracted, Lorenzo tightens his grip. He surrounds himself with bodyguards, ruffians with names like Black Martin, Morgante the Giant, Mutant, armed with swords and crossbows. He's the only man in Florence exempt from the ban on carrying weapons. He controls foreign policy personally, keeping 2 sets of correspondence, brief, meaningless letters for the Signoria and detailed, strategic ones for himself. In 1472, he writes in his private ledger, "I find that from 1434 until now we have spent large sums of money on arms, buildings and taxes and other expenses amounting to 663,755 florins. I do not regret this, though many would prefer to have even a part of that total in their purse, and I consider that it gave great honour to our position. I think the money was well spent, and I am well pleased." 663,755 florins, a staggering fortune, spent not on the bank, not on trade, but on image, on charity and piety, on festivals and frescoes and architectural marvels, on looking like royalty, because that's what Lorenzo wants, not to be a merchant, not even to be the richest man in Florence. He wants to move beyond fate, beyond the very system of the age. You don't become aristocracy. You can't move out of the shadow of rural Mugello. But he wants to try. Lorenzo de' Medici wants to become a prince. He buys racehorses, Arabs imported from Sicily and Tunisia, and breeds them on his estates. Racing is an aristocratic sport. Breeding winners costs a fortune. He doesn't care. In 1481, his horse Lucciola wins the San Giovanni Palio, a race usually dominated by foreign nobility. He marries Clarice Orsini, a Roman noblewoman, to connect the Medici bloodline to old aristocracy. The Florentines don't like it. They think she's haughty, cold, too pious. Lorenzo doesn't care. His children will have noble blood. The proof of this ambition appears in the city's art. Between 1470 and 1475, Sandro Botticelli paints the Adoration of the Magi. Just as Benozzo Gozzoli had done in the family's private chapel, Botticelli transforms a biblical scene into a mirror of Medici power, turning the gospel into a parade of characters from Florentine society. The patron, a businessman named Gaspare di Zanobi del Lama, commissioned it specifically as an homage to the Medici. The three kings aren't ancient monarchs. They are the Medici patriarchs. Cosimo the Elder is widely identified as the Magus kneeling before the Virgin, touching Jesus' feet. His sons, Piero and Giovanni, are resurrected here as the other two kings, draped in red and white. They were already dead when the panel was painted, yet here they are, immortalized as kings. And standing to the side, observing the dynasty they have inherited, is the new generation. The young man with black hair and red clothing is thought to be Lorenzo himself, while the figure on the left with a knight's sword is supposed to be his brother Giuliano. The arrogance of their poses are unmistakable. They aren't just bankers anymore. The Medici is a fixture of the holy narrative. Botticelli himself is likely there too, painted as the blonde man looking directly at us. And all the while, the Medici Bank is rotting. Lorenzo is a brilliant diplomat, but a terrible banker. He delegates too much authority to branch managers who act like princes themselves. Tommaso Portinari, running the Bruges branch, makes massive unsecured loans to Charles the Bold of Burgundy and Edward IV of England, exactly the kind of lending forbidden by Giovanni de Medici. When Charles dies in battle, and Edward's regime collapses during the Wars of the Roses, the debts become uncollectible. The bank is hemorrhaging money, and Lorenzo, desperate to maintain his lifestyle, does something unforgivable. He embezzles from the state. He raids the Monte delle Dotti, the dowry fund, a public institution designed to help Florentine families save for their daughters' marriages. Over the course of the 1480s, Lorenzo misappropriates nearly 75,000 florins from it. He also diverts vast sums from other government accounts to prop up the failing bank. This is a financial house of cards held together by political power and public spectacle. But Lorenzo's real problem isn't the bank, it's the enemies he's made. And in April 1478, they come for him. Remember that scene we started with in the Duomo? The bells, the host, the daggers. Here's what happened next. The conspiracy was organized by the Pazzi family, old rivals of the Medici, wealthy bankers themselves, resentful of being sidelined. They were joined by Archbishop Francesco Salviati of Pisa, who hated Lorenzo for blocking his appointment, and by several minor nobles with grudges of their own. The backing came from Rome. Pope Sixtus IV was furious with Lorenzo for refusing to finance a war against Florence's allies and for interfering in papal appointments. Sixtus gave his tacit approval for the plot. Not explicitly, but he made it clear he wouldn't mind if Lorenzo disappeared. The original plan was to poison Lorenzo at a banquet, but Giuliano didn't attend. He was sick, and the conspirators couldn't risk killing only one brother. So they shifted to Plan B, a public assassination during High Mass in the Duomo, where both brothers would be present. They recruited a mercenary captain, Montesecco, to do the killing. But when he learned the attack would happen in a church, during Mass, at the elevation of the host, the most sacred moment of Catholic liturgy, he refused. "I will not commit sacrilege," he said. So the Pazzi turned to priests. Stefano da Bagnone and Antonio Maffei, clergymen who'd never held a weapon in their lives, agreed to kill Lorenzo. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The attack itself you've already seen. Giuliano dying in a pool of blood. Lorenzo escaping with a neck wound. The chaos, the screaming. What matters now is what came after. The plan called for a simultaneous seizure of the Palazzo della Signoria. The conspirators would declare the Republic restored while the Medici bled out in the cathedral. But everything went wrong. Archbishop Salviati stormed the palazzo with armed men, but the gonfaloniere, the chairman of the Signoria, realized something was wrong and locked himself in an upper room. Salviati's men fumbled, they shouted, they accomplished nothing. And then, the city woke up. Florentines poured into the streets, not to support the Pazzi, to defend the Medici. 3 generations of populist strategy paid off in that moment. The people saw the Medici as their protectors. They saw the Pazzi as aristocratic traitors. The retribution was swift and savage. Archbishop Salviati was captured and hanged from a window of the Palazzo della Signoria, still wearing his ecclesiastical robes. Francesco de Pazzi was hanged beside him. As they swung together, the dying archbishop bit into Francesco's chest, teeth sinking into flesh. Bernardo Bandini, who along with Francesco killed Giuliano, fled the city. He made it all the way to Constantinople before Lorenzo's agents tracked him down and dragged him back. Leonardo da Vinci sketched him at the moment of his execution, capturing the exact clothes he wore, the expression on his face. Jacopo de Pazzi, the family patriarch, was executed, buried, then dug up by a mob of boys who dragged his body through the streets, pissing on it, beating it, shouting insults. They threw it into the Arno. Downstream, someone fished it out and hanged it from a tree as a warning. Eventually it was cut down and thrown back into the river, where it floated away toward the sea. Over 70 conspirators were executed in the following weeks. Their bodies hung from the Palazzo della Signoria until the facade looked like a grotesque gallery, a monument to vengeance. Luca Landucci, the apothecary whose diary records these events, writes, "The palace had become a hideous gibbet. Lorenzo survived. His wound was shallow and healed quickly, but Giuliano, handsome, charming, beloved Giuliano, was gone." Lorenzo buried him in the family church of San Lorenzo. Sandro Botticelli painted a posthumous portrait of Giuliano. In it, Giuliano appears with his eyelids lowered, a silent figure in front of a half-open window, forever separated from the living. At the bottom left, a turtle dove rests on a dead branch. The golden age of youth was over. The age of survival had begun. In the aftermath of the Pazzi Conspiracy, Pope Sixtus IV excommunicated Lorenzo, along with the entire Florentine government. The papal armies, allied with Naples, invaded Tuscany. Florence was at war, isolated, desperate. And Lorenzo il Magnifico, Lorenzo the Magnificent, did something extraordinary. In December 1479, alone, without an army, he travelled to Naples to negotiate directly with King Ferrante, Ferdinand I, the ruler who kept his dead enemies mummified in his dungeon as trophies. Lorenzo walked into Ferrante's palace unarmed and said, "I place myself in your hands." It was insane. It was brilliant. Ferrante, impressed by the audacity, decided Lorenzo was more useful as an ally than a corpse. They negotiated a treaty. Naples abandoned its alliance with the Pope. Florence was saved. Lorenzo returned home a hero. He used the crisis to consolidate even more power, creating the Council of 70, an appointed body, not elected, that had veto power over the Signoria. He wasn't first among equals anymore. He was the first citizen, unambiguously, unchallenged. So at this point, the Pazzi are destroyed, the Pope has been outmaneuvered, Lorenzo controls Florence more completely than ever, and the Republic exists in name only. And Lorenzo has enemies watching. One of them is a Dominican friar named Girolamo Savonarola, a thin, severe ascetic who preaches at San Marco. He's begun attacking the luxury of the age, the corruption of the clergy, the fine tresses of hair and silk waistcoats worn by supposedly holy men. He denounces the Medici's wealth, the decadence of Florence itself. Lorenzo, ever the diplomat, sends a generous donation to Savonarola's convent. Perhaps money can buy silence. Savonarola sends it back with a message. A virtuous pastor is like a good watchdog. When a thief comes along and throws him a bone, he puts it to one side and goes on barking. Lorenzo laughs it off. One troublesome friar is hardly a threat. Not while the crowds are cheering at his festivals, not while Michelangelo is carving marble in the Palazzo Medici, not while the Golden Age continues. But Savonarola keeps preaching, and some people are listening. The Golden Age is about to turn very dark. Lorenzo rules for another 14 years after the Pazzi Conspiracy. He maintains the tripartite alliance between Florence, Milan, and Naples. He acts as peacemaker among Italian states, earning international respect that shores up his power at home. In 1487, a menagerie of exotic animals arrives from the Sultan of Constantinople: a giraffe, a lion, strange-looking goats. Florence and Lorenzo have the friendship of the East. But his real legacy is being built in the studios and workshops of Florence. Lorenzo gathers artists and scholars around him like a prince collecting jewels. He houses the young Michelangelo Buonarroti in the Palazzo Medici, treating the sculptor like a son, letting him dine at the family table. Michelangelo studies Lorenzo's collection of ancient statues, learning from Roman masters. Years later, he will design the monuments in San Lorenzo where the Medici lie in eternal rest. Leonardo da Vinci moves through Lorenzo's court, brilliant and restless. Lorenzo doesn't commission works from Leonardo directly. The young artist is too experimental, too unpredictable, but he facilitates connections, opens doors. When Leonardo seeks a patron in Milan, Lorenzo sends him north with a gift for the Duke: a silver lyre, an introduction, a chance. Marsilio Ficino translates Plato at Lorenzo's expense. Pico della Mirandola writes his oration on the dignity of man under Medici patronage. Angelo Poliziano composes poetry celebrating the Medici family as modern Athenians. And for Lorenzo's cousin, Sandro Botticelli paints two works that signal a profound shift in the soul of the city. First, the Primavera. At first glance, Primavera is a celebration of spring, but it is also political philosophy rendered as myth. Set in a grove of orange trees, the round golden fruits a subtle nod to the family's emblems. It portrays Florence as a flourishing garden under Medici protection. It is a message of peace and prosperity after the violence of the Pazzi Conspiracy. But look closer at the story Botticelli tells. It flows from right to left. It begins with violence, the cold wind Zephyrus seizing the nymph Chloris. But in this garden, that chaos is tamed. Chloris is transformed into Flora, the stunning goddess of abundance. Venus stands in the center, orchestrating the harmony. And on the far left, Mercury, representing reason, raises his staff to dispel the clouds. The message to the Florentine elite is clear. The Medici do not just rule the city, they turn chaos into culture. Then, the birth of Venus. Here, Botticelli does something unprecedented. He paints a nude pagan goddess on a monumental scale, like a church altarpiece. But this is not a scene of seduction. It is a scene of arrival. On the left, Zephyrus, the god of the west wind, blows her toward the coast, his breath carrying the spirit. Roses, symbols of spring and love, tumble through the air around him. On the right, a handmaiden waits on the shore, ready to wrap Venus's divine nakedness in a flowered cloak. Influenced by the Neoplatonic philosophers in Lorenzo's court, Marsilio Ficino, Angelo Poliziano, this imagery isn't just decoration, it is a theological argument. They believed that physical beauty was a ladder to the spiritual. By depicting the goddess arriving from the sea, Botticelli is visualizing the ascent of the soul, from matter, through beauty, to the divine. The Medici are claiming that they are the shore, that their Florence is the place where divine beauty makes landfall. But they also signal that the Medici have moved beyond commissioning art for penance. They are no longer only asking God for forgiveness, they are claiming the legacy of the ancient world for themselves. They're not abandoning God. They're saying, we can serve Christ and inherit the glories of Athens and Rome, that Florence, and by extension the Medici, are the rightful heirs to both Jerusalem and classical wisdom, united under divine order. Lorenzo expands the family art collection, antique gems, cameos, medals, rare manuscripts, engraving his initials on many pieces. He engraves his name in Latin shorthand, LAV for Lorenzo, MED for Medici, but between them sits a conspicuous R. It stands for Rex, King. He builds a villa at Poggio a Caiano, a magnificent country house with a pedimented facade inspired by Roman temples, a building that will influence European architecture for centuries. But the money is running out. The bank continues to collapse. Branch after branch fails. Lorenzo's embezzlement from public funds becomes an open secret, and his health, like his father's and grandfather's, is failing. The gout that plagued Piero now afflicts Lorenzo. He travels to spas across Tuscany, seeking relief, but nothing works. In 1489, he achieves one final triumph. His second son, Giovanni, is made a cardinal at age 13. It's unprecedented for a merchant family. This was an honor normally reserved for aristocratic families, and Giovanni now had the status of a prince. Lorenzo is ecstatic. "This is the greatest thing that has ever happened to our house," he writes. He writes Giovanni a letter of advice. "You ought to be grateful to God and continually to recollect that it is not through your merits, your prudence, or your solicitude that this event has taken place, but through his favor, which you can only repay by a pious, chaste, and exemplary life. A handsome house and a well-ordered family will be preferable to a great retinue and a splendid residence. Invite others to your house oftener than you receive invitations. Let your own food be plain and take sufficient exercise." It's good advice. Giovanni will ignore most of it. In early April 1492, a storm breaks over Florence. Lightning strikes the lantern of Brunelleschi's dome, shattering the marble and sending debris crashing down onto the cathedral floor. It is an omen. Lorenzo is dying. Girolamo Savonarola, the populist friar who had long predicted this moment, is now a very powerful figure in Florence. He has long warned of corruption. He has preached against the tyrants who usurp the freedom of the people. And now he comes to the bedside of the dying Il Magnifico. The story goes that the friar offered absolution on 3 conditions. First, that Lorenzo have faith in God. He agreed. Second, that he return his stolen wealth. He hesitated, but agreed. And finally, that he restore the liberty of Florence. According to the myth, Lorenzo turned his face to the wall and died in silence, damned by his own pride. In reality, his end was peaceful. Savonarola blessed him. But the fact that the rumour survived tells us everything. To the people of Florence, Lorenzo had become a man who could not be absolved, a man who had traded his city's soul for his own glory. Lorenzo il Magnifico dies on April 8th, 1492, aged 43. His doctor, who had insisted until the very end that he would recover, threw himself headfirst into a well the next day. Lorenzo's funeral was held in San Lorenzo. The apothecary Landucci writes, "He was the most glorious man that ever existed, the richest and the greatest." But another chronicler, Piero Parenti, records a different reaction. He writes that the death of Lorenzo was secretly welcomed by many, that the people thought the Republic would get its liberty back and they would be free of servitude, for under Lorenzo's rule, the city had been completely enslaved. Both are true. And across the city, in the shadowed cloisters of San Marco, one man sees vindication. Girolamo Savonarola. The gaunt Dominican has been railing against the corruption of the city for years. To him, Lorenzo wasn't a magnificent leader. He was a tyrant who distracted the people with carnivals while their souls rotted. Now, the tyrant is gone. Divine judgment. And Savonarola doesn't offer eulogies. He offers terror. Italy, he cries, Rome, Florence, tribulation is coming. A scourge will fall upon this land. God is angry. God is watching. Gladius Domini super terram cito et velociter. The sword of the Lord striking the earth, swift and soon. Some dismiss him as a fanatic, but others, those who resented the Medici festivals, who saw their daughters dressing like courtesans, who watched priests and even popes keep concubines while the magnificent threw gold at artists. They listen and they wait. Lorenzo's eldest son, Piero, inherits power. He's arrogant, spoiled, inexperienced. He alienates his father's advisors. He abandons the tripartite alliance and sides exclusively with Naples. And then, in 1494, disaster strikes. Charles VIII of France invades Italy, marching south to press a claim to the throne of Naples. His army is massive, equipped with new bronze cannons that can reduce fortress walls to rubble in hours. It's the end of an era, the age of city-states, of balanced alliances, of Renaissance diplomacy. The French bring with them the brutal reality of modern warfare. Piero panics. As Charles's army approaches Florence, Piero rides out to meet him and immediately surrenders, handing over key fortresses without resistance. When he returns to Florence, he expects gratitude. He's negotiated peace, hasn't he? He's spared the city from French cannons. The Florentines see it differently. He's given away their defences without a fight. He's acted like a coward, not a statesman. Piero rides to the Palazzo della Signoria to address the government. But when he reaches the piazza, the doors are barred. The guards refuse him entry. The square fills with citizens. They're shouting the same two words again and again. The people, liberty. The people, liberty. The old Republican spirit, dormant for 60 years under Medici rule, suddenly awakens. Inside, the Signoria votes. The decision is swift, unanimous. Piero de Medici, his brothers, and the entire Medici family are exiled from Florence, forever. Their bank accounts are seized, their palaces are sacked. Everything Giovanni de Medici built, everything Cosimo secured, everything Lorenzo performed, gone in a single vote. The bank, already hemorrhaging from bad loans and Lorenzo's embezzlement, finally implodes. The Medici are finished. Or so it seems. Piero has only ruled Florence for 2 years. he'll be remembered as Piero the Unfortunate. And into the vacuum steps Girolamo Savonarola. He's thin, intense, with a hooked nose and burning eyes. He wears a hair shirt beneath his robes. He eats coarse bread, herbs, a little fruit, nothing more. For years he's been preaching that God would send a scourge to punish Italy's sins. When Charles VIII invaded with his thunderous cannons, the people remembered. The prophet was right. Savonarola meets with Charles personally, and he proclaims the king as God's own instrument. But he also offers a warning. If the king fails to show mercy to Florence, to her women, her citizens, her liberty, God will have no choice but to find another instrument to fulfill his will. His negotiations help ensure the French army passes through Florence without sacking it. His authority soars. He preaches to crowds of thousands in the cathedral. When he speaks of Christ's passion, the crowd feels their hair stand on end. He doesn't just condemn sin, he offers a vision. Florence can become the new Jerusalem, a city governed by God's law, purified by suffering, redeemed through righteousness. The people, traumatized by invasion and betrayed by the Medici, believe him. Although he holds no office personally, what he preaches in the Duomo is what the Signoria will vote into law. He abolishes the oligarchy, broadens the right to vote. He reinstates the republic, but it is a theocratic republic, where sin is a crime against the state. Women will abandon their silk and brocade. Men will put away their carnival songs. Children will form a sacred militia, going door to door to collect vanities for burning. Give yourself to the simple life, sons and daughters, he preaches. He bans gambling, prostitution, immodest dress. He suppresses the paleo horse race, that aristocratic spectacle Lorenzo loved. He replaces carnival floats with religious processions where children march behind a statue of the infant Jesus, singing hymns instead of Lorenzo's bawdy songs. Marriages collapse. Women flood into convents, the streets empty of laughter. On Shrove Tuesday, 1497, in the Piazza della Signoria, the same square where the Pazzi conspirators once swung from palace windows, Savonarola builds a pyramid, a bonfire of the Vanities. The citizens bring their sinful possessions, wigs, perfumes, mirrors, playing cards, dice, books by Boccaccio and Petrarch, paintings of nude subjects. Even Botticelli, guilt-stricken, throws some of his own works onto the flames. The fire consumes it all. Gone are the carnival songs. In their place, hymns. Gone are the festivals. In their place, fasts and processions. The city that was a riot of colour and sound becomes grey, silent, oppressive. The sound of the city changes. No more lutes, no more laughter. Instead, the clatter of zoccoli, wooden clogs, echoing through empty streets. Niccolò Machiavelli will later mock this period, referring to it as the Republic of Wooden Clogs. But the friar's sermons and his infamous bonfire of the Vanities were targeted at the very spectacles, portraits and luxuries that Lorenzo had made central to Medici legitimacy. The theocracy was a backlash against Medici culture, proof of how fragile Florence's balance between exuberant art and moral austerity really was. But the austerity has consequences. Trade declines. The economy stagnates. People grow weary of Savonarola's harangues. And then he overreaches. Savonarola denounces Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, the Spanish libertine who bought his way to the papal throne. He denounces the Pope as corrupt, a worldly sinner unfit for the office, unfit as vicar of Christ. He's not wrong. Alexander VI is probably the most corrupt pope in history, openly keeping mistresses, fathering children, selling offices, waging wars. But he's also powerful. Alexander excommunicates Savonarola. He orders the friar to stop preaching. Savonarola refuses. In 1498, Alexander's agents arrest him. They torture him with the strappado, hanging him by his wrists, tied behind his back, then dropping him, dislocating his shoulders. They do this repeatedly, demanding a confession. Savonarola eventually confesses to false prophecy. After enough drops from the strappado, most men will confess to anything. On May 23, 1498, in the same Piazza della Signoria where he built his bonfires, Savonarola is hanged and burned. The executioner builds the pyre on the exact spot where the pyramid of Vanities stood. Luca Landucci records the grim irony. The one who wanted to burn is now himself put to the flames. The ashes are thrown into the river Arno to prevent them from becoming relics. Florence is now a republic again. The Medici remain in exile. For 14 years, the city governs itself, free of both friar and merchant prince. And to mark this freedom, the city calls upon the young Michelangelo. He is given a massive block of marble that has been lying neglected in the cathedral yard for 25 years. Previous sculptors had hacked at it, ruined it, and given up. They called the block the Giant. Michelangelo takes this broken stone and carves the David. But this isn't the private, boyish David the Medici kept in their garden, the slender youth standing over a severed head. This is a titan. And crucially, Michelangelo changes the narrative. He doesn't show David after the victory. He shows him before. The rock is still in his hand. The muscles are taut. The brow is furrowed. It is a portrait of pending violence. The Republic places him right at the door of the Palazzo della Signoria, his eyes fixed in a glare, looking south, towards Rome, towards the exiled Medici. It is a warning in stone. But the Medici are not finished. The family rebuilds in Rome. Giovanni de Medici, now Cardinal Giovanni, uses the fortune his father left him and the connections built over 3 generations to maneuver within the papal court. He's charming, gregarious, well-liked. He throws lavish parties. He's generous with favours. But his ambition isn't limited to Rome. He wants Florence back. In 1512, he makes his move. Using Spanish military support, Cardinal Giovanni marches on Tuscany. The government collapses. The Republic is forced to accept Medici rule again. Giovanni installs his brother Giuliano de Medici as ruler of Florence. The sons of Lorenzo il Magnifico have returned, not as citizens, but as masters. And with his home secured, Cardinal Giovanni aims higher. It is 1513. The year prior, Michelangelo finished his work on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Raphael has completed the School of Athens in the Apostolic Palace. Both masterpieces were commissioned by the warrior pope, Julius II. But Julius is dead. And in his place, the 37-year-old Cardinal Giovanni de Medici is elected Pope Leo X. Cardinal Giovanni had planned the conclave carefully. He'd secured the support of many cardinals already. He doesn't just rely on the Holy Spirit, he relies on his father's legacy, the family fortune, and the relationships he himself had forged with his lavish lifestyle in Rome. Promises are made. Offices are traded. The Medici Bank calls in its political debts. Whether it's charisma or cash, the result is clear. A Medici is now the vicar of Christ. Leo X is by all accounts a terrible pope. He's fat, short-sighted, pleasure-loving. He hunts in boots, scandalous for a pontiff, as it made it impossible to kiss his feet. He keeps a pet white elephant named Hanno. He throws banquets featuring delicacies like peacock's tongues. He creates an unprecedented amount of venal offices, positions that exist solely to be sold, to fund his lifestyle. He drains the papal treasury within 2 years. To replenish it, he sells indulgences, pieces of paper that promise forgiveness of sins, sold to the faithful for cash. The church has sold indulgences before, but Leo takes it to a new level, openly funding the construction of St. Peter's Basilica with the profits. Giovanni de Medici laundered usury through chapels. His great-great-grandson is now monetizing salvation itself. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther nails 95 theses to a church door in Wittenberg, protesting the corruption. Leo dismisses Luther as a drunken German. He doesn't realize he's watching the birth of the Protestant Reformation, the greatest schism in Christian history, a fracture that will split Europe, topple kingdoms, and kill millions. Leo's most famous quote captures his attitude perfectly. God has given us the papacy. Let us enjoy it. And enjoy it he does. He fills the papal court with artists, musicians, and intellectuals. He commissions Raphael to capture this new golden age. But Raphael delivers something dangerous, the truth. Following the precedent he set with his portrait of Julius II, whom he depicted not as a god, but as an exhausted old man clutching his chair after a lost war, Raphael refuses to idealize the Pope. Leo's portrait is a study in realism. Raphael shifts the focus inward. We don't see a divine icon. In earlier papal portraits, there is distance between the vicar of Christ and the audience. The Pope appears idealized, divine, and distant. Symbols of authority, not men. Raphael introduces psychological presence and physical immediacy. He doesn't abandon authority and dignity, but his popes are not divine symbols. They are embodied men whose power is inseparable from their humanity. Here, we see a man. Raphael paints him as he is, overweight, with a puffed, heavy face and a somber expression. There is no flattery here, only presence. He holds a gold-rimmed magnifying glass, an unsparing admission of his poor eyesight. Beneath his hand rests the Hamilton Bible, a 14th century masterpiece. It is likely a copy gifted to him by his father, Lorenzo the Magnificent. Even the furniture is branded. The round pommel of his chair is polished to a shine, unmistakably echoing the palais, the balls on the Medici coat of arms. Standing behind him are his cousins, acting as a royal escort. One of them is Giulio de Medici, the future Pope Clement VII. They look like masters of the universe draped in velvet and silk. But there is a tension in their faces, because this was painted in 1518. Luther has already attacked the Pope. The foundation is cracking. But for now, there's no end in sight to the extravagance within the Vatican. 54 men are employed in the cooking and serving of food. The satirist Pietro Aretino said, Leo X's character swung from one extreme to another, and it was anyone's guess which he enjoyed more, the virtues of men of letters or the tittle-tattle of buffoons. When Hanno the white elephant dies, Aretino writes a satirical last will and testament of the elephant, assigning the beast's organs to the cardinals they fit most. In truth, the elephant is buried under the Vatican, where his bones remain to this day. It is in these times, amidst the wreckage of the Republic and the corrupt glory of the papacy, that a former Florentine diplomat, out of work and desperate, tries to make sense of the new world. His name is Niccolò Machiavelli. He has seen the Medici return to Florence with Spanish steel. He sees the efficiency of their ruthlessness, and so he writes a handbook for them, a guide on how to acquire and maintain power, divorced from morality. Machiavelli writes The Prince. Machiavelli had served the Florentine Republic as a diplomat. He'd negotiated with kings, observed the mechanics of power firsthand. When the Medici returned, they dismissed him, suspected him of conspiracy, imprisoned him and tortured him with the strappado. His shoulders were dislocated. He was dropped, over and over, hanging by his wrists. He didn't break. He maintained his innocence. Released, unemployed, living in poverty, Machiavelli writes a book, essentially a job application to the Medici. He dedicates it to Lorenzo di Piero de' Medici, Duke of Urbino, Lorenzo the Magnificent's grandson and the Lord of Florence following Giuliano. The Prince is a cold, analytical study of power. It strips away the moral pretenses, the Christian virtues, the humanist ideals, and looks at politics as it actually operates. Machiavelli argues that a ruler must be willing to act immorally to maintain stability, that it is much safer to be feared than loved, that mercy toward enemies can be weakness, while decisive punishment deters plots. He's writing about what he's seen throughout a life close to power. He was 8 years old when Lorenzo the Magnificent survived the Pazzi Conspiracy. He lived through the decisive vengeance that followed. He lived through the expulsion of the Medici, the restoration of the Republic under Savonarola, and the return of the Medici years later. As a diplomat, he watched Cesare Borgia ruthlessly pacify the Romagna. Machiavelli offered him as the model the Medici ought to imitate. He synthesizes these observations into a new political reality. Appear virtuous, act ruthlessly, maintain power by any means necessary. The Medici never give Machiavelli a job, but his book becomes the manual for European princes for centuries. And the word Machiavellian enters the language as a synonym for cunning, amoral politics. Leo X dies in 1521, having accomplished little except draining the treasury and igniting the Reformation. The Church briefly attempts a correction, electing a stern Dutch reformist as Adrian VI, but he dies after less than 2 years. In 1523, the papacy returns to the family. Giulio de' Medici, illegitimate son of Giuliano, Lorenzo the Magnificent's brother who was killed in the Pazzi Conspiracy, becomes Pope Clement VII in 1523. Clement is Leo's opposite, cold, calculating, austere, but he's indecisive at the worst possible moment. Europe is now dominated by two superpowers, the Holy Roman Empire, ruled by Charles V, and France, ruled by Francis I. They're locked in a struggle for control of Italy. Clement tries to play both sides, forming alliances, breaking them, switching partners. It's a disaster. In 1527, Charles V's armies, unpaid, mutinous, half-mad with hunger, march on Rome. Clement has aligned with France against the emperor, and now Charles's soldiers want revenge. The sack of Rome is one of the greatest atrocities of the Renaissance. Imperial troops storm the city on May 6, 1527. They rape, pillage, murder. They use St. Peter's Basilica as a stable for their horses. They torture cardinals to discover where they've hidden their gold. They loot churches, smash relics, mock the sacraments. Clement barely escapes, fleeing through a secret passage to the Castel Sant'Angelo, where he's besieged for months. The population of Rome, around 55,000 before the sack, drops to 10,000. Thousands are killed. Thousands more flee. Clement emerges from the Castel Sant'Angelo a broken man. He grows a beard, unprecedented for a pope, as a visible sign of mourning and humiliation. Sebastiano del Piombo paints him, hollow-eyed, haunted, defeated. In Florence, the people see their chance. With the Pope besieged and powerless, they expel the Medici again and restore the Republic. But Clement, humiliated and desperate, makes a deal with the devil. He crowns Charles V as Holy Roman Emperor in exchange for military support. In 1529, imperial troops besiege Florence. The siege lasts 10 months. 30,000 civilians die, many from starvation. People eat mice, selling them for 16 soldi each. Graffiti appears on the city walls, a picture of Clement VII, blindfolded on the scaffold. The words poor but free spread throughout the city. Envoys declare they would rather see Florence in ashes than under the Medici. The city holds out as long as it can. But in 1530, starved and exhausted, Florence surrenders. The game is over. Florence has lost its republic for good. The Medici are no longer bankers pretending to be citizens. They're dukes enforced by imperial steel. The Florentine constitution is rewritten. The republic is abolished. In 1532, Alessandro de Medici, widely believed to be the illegitimate son of either Clement VII or Lorenzo, Duke of Urbino, is made Duke of Florence. The Republic is dead. The Medici are now hereditary rulers. Alessandro de Medici, first Duke of Florence, is by all accounts a tyrant. He's cruel, paranoid, sexually voracious. Republican exiles spread rumours that he and his cousin Lorenzino roam the streets at night, attacking citizens, violating convents. Whether the rumours are accurate or propaganda, Alessandro is deeply unpopular. He's seen as illegitimate, both in the literal sense and the political sense. He's a bastard, ruling a city that once prided itself on liberty. On January 5th, 1537, the feast of the Epiphany, Alessandro's cousin Lorenzino comes to him with an offer. There's a woman, Lorenzino says, beautiful, willing. She's waiting in a private room. Alessandro, trusting his cousin, follows him to a bedroom. Inside, there's no woman. Instead, there's an assassin, a hired killer named Scoronconcolo. Alessandro realizes the trap too late. He fights back, unarmed, desperate. He bites down on Lorenzino's finger, sinking his teeth to the bone. But Scoronconcolo stabs him over and over. Alessandro, first Duke of Florence, is stabbed to death, betrayed by his closest companion. Lorenzino flees Florence, claiming he's acted as a new Brutus, a liberator who killed a tyrant to restore the Republic. But Florence doesn't return to republicanism. Instead, the imperial troops occupying the city install another Medici, Cosimo I, a distant cousin from a minor branch of the family, only 17 years old. The conspirators expected chaos. Instead, they get a new duke. Cosimo I is nothing like Alessandro. He's calculating, efficient, ruthless. Within months, he defeats Republican exiles at the Battle of Montemurlo. He restructures the government, builds a bureaucracy, creates a navy. In 1537, Emperor Charles V grants him the title Duke of Florence. In 1569, he's elevated to Grand Duke of Tuscany. Cosimo understands better than any Medici before him the power of imagery. He commissions portraits and other artworks from Agnolo Bronzino and Giorgio Vasari. In these paintings, Cosimo appears in armour. He appears surrounded by artists and architects. He appears as Orpheus, taming the three-headed hound that guards hell. He appears as a glorious Roman emperor with Romulus and Remus at his feet. And he appears seated in the heavens as the personification of Florence herself crowns him with an oak wreath. Notice what has disappeared: Christian humility. Cosimo doesn't appear as a wise man kneeling before Christ like his ancestors. He appears as a classical hero. The Medici aren't asking God for legitimacy anymore. They're claiming it from antiquity itself. Cosimo is saying, "We are no longer bankers. We are royalty." His wife, Eleonora of Toledo, wears sumptuous brocade. Their children are depicted in coordinated compositions, emphasizing dynastic continuity. He places a bust of himself at the fortress of Portoferraio on Elba, his bronze gaze overlooking the sea, symbolically guarding Tuscan territory. These aren't just art, they're political statements. Cosimo is saying, we are no longer bankers. We are royalty. We are a dynasty. We are legitimate. To prove it, he breaks with tradition. he abandons the ancestral family home, the Palazzo Medici, and moves his court directly into the government's headquarters, the Palazzo della Signoria. He physically occupies the Republic, but he soon finds the old fortress too cramped, too medieval, and too grim for a royal court. What he seeks instead is a palace fit for a king. In 1549, his wife, Eleonora of Toledo, purchases the massive Palazzo Pitti across the river. It is vast, modern, and surrounded by gardens. The family moves their court there, distancing themselves from the noise and grit of the city centre. And the ancient seat of the Republic, the Palazzo della Signoria, acquires a new name. From now on, it is simply the Palazzo Vecchio, the Old Palace. But Cosimo does not abandon it. Instead, he transforms the obsolete seat of Republican government into an instrument of ducal power. First, he commissions Vasari to build a massive complex of administrative offices, the Uffizi, flanking the Old Palace. With the Uffizi, he centralizes every magistrate, every guild, every lever of government under his direct gaze. The top floor houses the family's art collection, where invited guests can marvel at centuries of accumulated culture. Proof that the Medici aren't just administrators, but patrons of civilization itself. The Uffizi is a bureaucratic fortress disguised as a masterpiece. Then he orders Vasari to build a secret passageway, the Vasari Corridor. The corridor is a kilometre-long aerial tunnel that snakes from the Palazzo Pitti across the top of the Ponte Vecchio, through the newly built Uffizi and into the Palazzo Vecchio. It allows the Grand Duke to move across the city freely, unseen, safe from assassins' daggers. Cosimo the Elder walked the streets, shaking hands, playing the modest citizen. Cosimo I walks literally above the heads of his subjects. He is no longer one of them. He is untouchable. Finally, he claims the heart of the Palazzo Vecchio, the Salone dei Cinquecento, the Hall of the 500. This vast hall was built to house the Great Council of the Republic, the voice of the people, 500 citizens chosen to represent their peers after the expulsion of the Medici under Savonarola. Cosimo silences it. He hijacks it. He hires Vasari to cover the walls with vast frescoes depicting the Medici family's military victories, their triumphs, and their divine favour. But to create this monument to himself, Cosimo must erase the Republic's greatest icons. Vasari paints over unfinished works by both Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo's legendary The Battle of Anghiari, a scene of Republican heroism, is buried beneath the new dynastic propaganda. Some say it is still there, hidden under a false wall behind Vasari's fresco, a ghost of liberty trapped behind a layer of Medici paint. But Vasari's work extends beyond the Great Hall. He transforms the palace's apartments into a visual genealogy, dedicating entire rooms to Cosimo's ancestors. In the Sala di Cosimo il Vecchio, dedicated to Cosimo the Elder, the Pater Patriae, the walls depict the founder's triumphant return from exile, a historical event reimagined not as a political maneuver, but as a heroic procession sanctioned by the people. In the Sala di Lorenzo il Magnifico, Vasari strips away the mask of the humble citizen entirely. One fresco depicts Lorenzo seated regally on a throne, receiving tribute from foreign ambassadors as if he were a monarch. Another captures the moment of his greatest diplomatic gamble, showing him in Naples negotiating peace with King Ferrante. By weaving these stories into the walls of the most important civic building in Florence, Vasari and Cosimo I aren't just decorating, they are canonizing the family. It is a rewriting of history, a propaganda campaign on a monumental scale. But Vasari goes further in his effort to fuse Florence and the Medici to make one synonymous with the other. He didn't just paint the Medici into history, He wrote them into it. In 1550, he publishes the lives of the most excellent painters, sculptors, and architects. It's the first true history of art, detailing the lives of giants like Giotto, Donatello, Leonardo, and Michelangelo. Meanwhile, he explicitly downplays the masters of Siena and Venice. The work has a very specific narrative. Art died with Rome, and it was reborn here, in Florence, under the care of the Medici. A rebirth, a rinascita, a renaissance. It is in Vasari's book that the term originates. He is the first to put a name to the era. Vasari dedicates the book to Cosimo I. He frames the Medici not just as rich patrons, but as the protagonists of human progress. And it worked. We still use Vasari's framework today. When you think of the Renaissance, you think of Florence, because Vasari told you to. The strategy hasn't changed since Cosimo the Elder commissioned Gozzoli's Magi Chapel over 100 years earlier. Only the scale has grown. Cosimo I is doing what his ancestors did, turning money into culture, culture into legitimacy, legitimacy into power. Except now he doesn't need to hide behind a republic. He can say it openly. He is the state. Yet, for a tyrant, he is surprisingly liberal with his own blood. Cosimo dotes on the women of his family. He grants his daughter, Isabella, and his daughter-in-law, Eleonora, freedoms unheard of in other Italian courts. They are educated, they host salons, they live independent lives. Under Cosimo's protection, they shine. But behind the polished portraits and the grand frescoes, the Medici family life is a nightmare. In 1562, Cosimo's wife Eleonora and two of their sons die within weeks of each other. The official story is malaria, but rumors whisper murder, that Cosimo killed his son Garzia for murdering his brother Giovanni in a quarrel. The truth is probably more mundane: disease, fever, the constant spectre of plague that hangs over Renaissance Italy. Cosimo the Great, first Grand Duke of Tuscany, dies in 1574, leaving the Grand Duchy to his son Francesco. The father was a statesman who ruled with an iron fist. The son is a brooding recluse who prefers dabbling in the shadows with chemistry and alchemy. With the old patriarch gone, the family's discipline collapses. The violence in the Medici household is no myth. But before we see how that darkness consumed the next generation in Florence, we must look to the one Medici who had already taken the family methods to the global stage. Her name is Catherine. Before Alessandro's death and the rise of Cosimo I, another Medici was already positioned to bring the family's influence far beyond Florence. Her name is Catherine. Her story begins in loss. Catherine de Medici was born on April 13, 1519, in Florence. Her mother, Madeleine de la Tour d'Auvergne, died shortly after childbirth. Her father, Lorenzo di Piero de Medici, Duke of Urbino, and the dedicatee of Machiavelli's prince, died within weeks of her mother. Catherine became an orphan before she could walk. She was also an heiress, tied to one of Europe's most politically significant families. Her early years were spent in Medici residences in Florence and Rome under the protection of her great-uncle Pope Leo X and later Pope Clement VII. She received a humanist education, reading Latin authors and Italian poets. Everything changed in 1527. As imperial troops attacked Rome and Clement VII sought refuge in the Castel Sant'Angelo, Florence expelled the Medici. Catherine, only 8, remained inside the reborn republic. Florentine leaders debated her fate. Some viewed her as a political hostage. She spent the next several years confined in convents, closely watched as the city defended itself against imperial siege. In 1530, Florence capitulated. Clement VII restored Medici rule and summoned Catherine to Rome. There, he arranged a marriage that would bind the Medici to one of Europe's major dynasties. King Francis I of France sought papal alliance. Clement VII could provide it, along with a substantial dowry. Catherine, 14 years old, would marry Francis's second son, Henri, Duke of Orleans. The match elevated Catherine to royalty, though many at the French court viewed her as insufficiently aristocratic and resented her Italian origins. The wedding took place in Marseille in 1533, presided over by Clement VII himself. He died the following year, leaving Catherine without her strongest patron. She entered adulthood in a court where she had rank but little influence, married to a husband who showed her no affection. She responded by paying attention to people, to alliances, to the workings of power. It's the same lesson Cosimo the Elder learned in Florence. If you can't rule openly, learn the machinery. Understand who owes whom, build networks, make yourself indispensable. Henri, Catherine's husband, devoted himself to Diane de Poitiers, a noblewoman 20 years his senior. The relationship was central to his life and public identity. Catherine did not challenge Diane's position directly. She understood it would isolate her further. For a decade, Catherine bore no children. The court speculated about annulment. But in 1544, she delivered her first child, a son. 9 more children followed, securing the Valois line. In 1547, King Francis I died and Henri II became king. Catherine became queen consort, though Diane de Poitiers continued to dominate the king's confidence. Catherine observed. She learned court dynamics, patronage patterns, and the ways policy was shaped. She strengthened her household, cultivated alliances, and prepared for a moment when she might be needed. That moment came suddenly. In 1559, during festivities celebrating the peace of Cateau Cambrésis, Henri II was mortally wounded in a jousting accident. He died on July 10th. Diane de Poitiers was removed from political influence. Catherine, now Queen Mother, became central to government as her 15-year-old son Francis II took the throne. Francis II's reign lasted little more than a year. After his death, his 10-year-old brother Charles IX succeeded him, and Catherine assumed a decisive governing role. France was divided by religious conflict. The spread of Protestantism had created rival noble factions and outbreaks of violence. Catherine sought compromise, edicts of limited toleration, negotiated settlements, and royal mediation. It's the same strategy the Medici used in Florence for generations. Balance factions, prevent any one group from becoming too powerful. Position yourself as the indispensable arbiter. But tensions escalated. In 1562, the first of what became the French Wars of Religion broke out, intermittent civil wars that would continue for decades. Catherine's political strategies made her a target for hostile pamphleteers. They accused her of manipulation, of undue influence, and sometimes of darker practices. She openly consulted astrologers, and her interest in medicines and perfumes fed rumors of poison. Her authority depended on maintaining the monarchy amid factional pressures. She's a widow surrounded by enemies, trying to maintain fragile order. Then, in 1572, came the event that would define her reputation for centuries. In August, Catherine arranges the marriage of her daughter Marguerite to Henri of Navarre, a leading Protestant prince. The wedding brought many Huguenot nobles to Paris. It was meant to be a gesture of reconciliation, a festival of unity, very much in the Medici tradition of using spectacle to build political bridges. 2 days later, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, the most powerful Protestant leader in France, is shot in the street. He survives, wounded, and retreats to his lodgings. At the Louvre, panic sets in. The Huguenots will blame the crown. They'll demand vengeance. They're armed, numerous, and they're here, in Paris, gathered for the wedding. In a midnight council, Catherine and King Charles IX make a decision. Whether Catherine pushes for it, whether Charles orders it himself, whether the Guise faction forces their hand. The sources, written by men with axes to grind, don't agree. The Medici learned long ago, work through proxies, leave no fingerprints. When Lorenzo crushed the Pazzi, 70 men swung from the Palazzo della Signoria, but Lorenzo's hands stayed clean. When Cosimo rigged elections, he never held the office himself. Catherine has learned the lesson well. Before dawn on August 24th, royal guards murder Coligny in his bed and throw his corpse into the street. Protestant leaders across Paris are hunted down and killed. The violence spreads beyond the intended targets. Targeted assassinations become mob violence. Thousands die in Paris and beyond. The Seine runs red with Protestant blood. Protestant pamphleteers will call Catherine the architect of the massacre, the Italian poisoner, the she-devil. Catholic apologists will claim the king acted alone to prevent a Huguenot coup. The truth, as always with the Medici, is impossible to pin down, but the blood is real enough, and Catherine's name will forever be attached to the massacre. Catherine de Medici outlived 4 kings, her father-in-law Francis I, her husband Henri II, and 2 of her sons, Francis II and Charles IX. She spent the last decades of her life trying to maintain royal authority during wars, assassinations, and factional struggles. And through it all, she continued the Medici strategy. She was a major patron of the arts. She commissioned the Valois tapestries, sponsored festivals, promoted architectural projects such as the Tuileries Palace, and supported Italian craftsmen and cooks who helped shape French court culture. Catherine uses spices not to mask the flavour of food, but to enhance it. She brings the recipes of her childhood to the French court. One of her personal favourites is carabaccia. It is a Tuscan dish, consisting of onions slowly simmered in broth, then topped with bread and cheese. Over time, this rustic import evolves. It becomes the famous French onion soup we know today. In 1581, the Ballet Comique de la Reine, commissioned by Catherine de Medici, is performed. It is a nearly 6-hour spectacle of music, poetry, and geometric choreography. It is widely considered the first true ballet in history. Culture is power. Image is legitimacy. If you control what people see, what they admire, what they celebrate, you control them more effectively than any army. Through diplomacy and marriage negotiations, she sought alliances that might stabilize France. Her daughter, Elizabeth, married Philip II of Spain. Her daughter Marguerite's marriage to Henri of Navarre would, after years of conflict, connect the Valois line to the future Bourbon dynasty. Catherine died on January 5th, 1589. She was buried in the Basilica of Saint-Denis among the rulers of France. Her legacy is complex, a queen who governed during one of the most turbulent periods in French history. She exercised power in circumstances few could have mastered, and her decisions, some prudent, some tragic, left a lasting imprint on France. But she brought the Medici method to a kingdom. The idea that spectacle, patronage, and calculated ruthlessness could hold a fractured state together. It worked in Florence for a century. In France, the results were more ambiguous. Catherine understood the lesson her ancestors taught. Power is most effective when it's invisible. Back in Florence, Cosimo the Great's heirs are about to prove that while power is hereditary, competence is not. The court is now centered in the grandeur of the Palazzo Pitti. But deep inside the Palazzo Vecchio, the old palace, the new Grand Duke of Tuscany, Francesco I, hides. He builds a studiolo, a secret vaulted room filled with cabinets of curiosities. Rare stones, animal specimens, alchemical equipment, strange artifacts. He spends hours there mixing chemicals, conducting experiments, ignoring his duties. But outside the quiet walls of the studiolo, the family is rotting. In 1576, the darkness breaks into the open. Francesco's sister Isabella and his sister-in-law Eleonora are both strangled by their husbands on the same day, possibly by pre-arrangement. Isabella de Medici takes a lover, an offence her husband, Paolo Giordano Orsini, will not tolerate. He strangles her with his bare hands. Her body is placed in a coffin prepared in advance. The cover story is that she died of a sudden illness, apoplexy. Eleonora di Toledo, married to Francesco's brother Pietro, is also murdered. Pietro is violent, unstable, possibly insane. Eleonora has an affair. Pietro finds out. After a dance, he follows her to her room and strangles her with a dog leash. Pietro writes to his brother, the Grand Duke Francesco, the next morning. "Last night at 3 o'clock, an accident happened to my wife and she died, so your highness can be at peace." Francesco does nothing. He knows. What's more, he approves. The murders are covered up, explained away. The Medici women are held to impossible standards, chastity, obedience, silence, while the men indulge in every vice. And the tragedy is absolute. This was the extinguishing of a light. Isabella de Medici was called the star of the House of Medici. A true Renaissance woman, she composed for the lute, she sang, she cultivated intellectual circles. Poets composed sonnets, calling her a conduit to God, illustrious and exceptional. She commissioned art for her own enjoyment, poetry and plays and sculptures created for pleasure, not for devotion. As one chronicler said of her, wit, beauty, and talent made her conspicuous among all the women of the day, and she captivated every heart except her husband's. Speaking Spanish, French, and Latin fluently, a perfect musician, singing beautifully, a poetess and improvisatrice by nature, Isabella was the soul of all around her and the fairest star of the Medici. And so her husband killed her, and Grand Duke Francesco I, himself guilty of adultery, approved. His wife, Joanna of Austria, is miserable. Francesco ignores her, preferring the company of his mistress, Bianca Capello, a Venetian woman of questionable reputation. Francesco flaunts his mistress openly, despite pleas from his brother, Cardinal Ferdinando, to be more discreet. Francesco builds a villa to appease his mistress, the Villa di Pratolino. In the Mannerist garden complex, the sculptor Giambologna designs the towering Apennine Colossus. The stone statue is of an 11-meter-tall old man crouched on the bank of a pond. Stalactites grow out of his form, as if he were birthed from the landscape itself, not sculpted by man. His hand is pressed against the head of a sea monster. Water drips continually from his face, as if he is constantly weeping. He is a personification of the Apennine Mountains, a guardian. He is divine, like Jupiter, strong and eternal. But this is not the serene beauty of the past. He is magnificent, yes, but he is also monstrous, unnatural. And inside him is a secret. 3 levels of caves and chambers, as well as a network of pipes giving the figure the impression of sweating and weeping. Sometimes the Grand Duke, ever the recluse, stays tucked away in the head chamber, fishing, the line dropped into the pond below from one of the giant's eyes. When Joanna dies in 1578, Francesco marries Bianca immediately. It scandalizes Europe. Bianca is a runaway, a witch who seduced the Duke, possibly a murderess. She's everything a Grand Duchess shouldn't be. In October 1587, Francesco and Bianca both die within hours of each other at the Villa di Poggio a Caiano. the same villa Lorenzo the Magnificent built. The official story is malaria. The persistent rumor is arsenic, administered by Francesco's brother Ferdinando, who becomes the next Grand Duke. Cardinal Ferdinando arrived at the villa on October 8th. Within days, the Duke and Duchess suffered violent vomiting, cold sweats, and restlessness, symptoms consistent with arsenic poisoning, and died 11 days apart. Ferdinando gave Francesco a lavish funeral, but buried Bianca quickly. Ferdinando I is competent. He improves the Tuscan navy, builds the port of Livorno, and encourages commerce. He establishes the Medici Oriental Press, producing Christian and scientific books in Arabic. He welcomes Spanish and Portuguese Jews fleeing persecution, turning Livorno into a cosmopolitan trading hub. But the next generation brings decline. Cosimo II, Ferdinando's son, rules from 1609 to 1621. He's a decent man, best known as the patron of Galileo Galilei. When Galileo discovers the four moons of Jupiter, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, he names them the Medicean stars. The family crest is now written in the heavens. But on Earth, the reality is less stellar. Cosimo delegates power to ministers. The bureaucracy swells. Corruption festers. His son, Ferdinando II, rules during the catastrophic 30 Years' War, which devastates Europe. Tuscany, sheltered by geography and careful neutrality, survives, but the economy stagnates. And then comes Cosimo III. Cosimo III rules from 1670 to 1723, 53 years of slow-motion disaster. He's vain, pompous, obsessively religious. He surrounds himself with pious, reactionary advisors who encourage his worst instincts. He raises taxes until merchants flee Tuscany. He bans young men and women from flirting. He sends spies to sniff for meat cooking on Fridays, a violation of church law. He persecutes Jews, forcing them into ghettos, banning them from trade. While the rest of Europe embraces the Enlightenment, science, reason, progress, Tuscany sinks into superstition. Cosimo's marriage is a catastrophe. His wife, Marguerite Louise of France, hates him. She hates Florence. She hates everything about her life. At dinner, she threatens to smash his head with a soup plate. She mocks him in front of the court. Eventually, she abandons him and returns to France, leaving their children behind. Their son, Ferdinando, is a brilliant patron of the arts. He detests his father, treating the Grand Duke and his army of priests with open contempt. Ferdinando is a creature of the senses. He is a singer and a harpsichordist, able to sight-read complex music at a glance. He recruits the inventor, Bartolomeo Cristofori from Padua, as his keeper of instruments. Cristofori builds a series of unusual harpsichords for the prince. And then, sometime at the turn of the century, while in Ferdinando's service, Cristofori invents the piano. Ferdinando indulges in wild, cross-dressing banquets arranged by his uncle, Cardinal Francesco Maria. But the party ends in Venice. During Carnival, he contracts syphilis. It is a slow, agonizing sentence. After years of suffering, his mind and body destroyed, he dies in 1713. He leaves no children. The succession now falls to his younger brother, Gian Gastone. And Gian Gastone is a broken man. Gian Gastone de Medici, the last Medici Grand Duke, rules from 1723 to 1737. At first, he seems like the breath of fresh air Florence needs. He is intelligent, liberal, and deeply resentful of the religious suffocation imposed by his father. He fires the spies who sniffed for roast meat on Fridays. He reduces the power of the church. He attempts to purge the corrupt ministers who had drained the state. He even defies Rome to honor one of the family's most famous protégés. For a century, the church had forbidden a proper burial for Galileo. Giangastone finally builds him a monumental tomb in the Basilica of Santa Croce, reuniting the scientist with the city that once celebrated him. But Giangastone is a man running out of time and running out of hope. His marriage to Anna Maria Franziska of Saxe-Lauenburg is a disaster. She's obsessed with hunting. She lives in a remote Bohemian castle. She refuses to move to Florence. Giangastone, who hates rural life, is miserable. He later describes her as not a dish to be eaten 12 months of the year. He abandons her and returns to Florence, where he locks himself in the Palazzo Pitti and rarely emerges. He takes to drink and surrounds himself with the charming commoner Giuliano Dami and a band of youths. He surrounds himself with the ruspanti, young men and women paid in ruspi coins to entertain him. They're prostitutes, ruffians, hangers-on. They drink with him, joke with him, shout insults at the aristocracy. The court is scandalized. In his final decade, he rarely leaves his bed, receiving officials while propped up on pillows. An account of his last public appearance during the Feast of St. John in 1729 describes a carriage halting amid Florence's revelry. The door opened and the Grand Duke, pale and powdered, leaned out only to vomit in front of the crowd. The image of the last Medici retching during a civic festival encapsulates the family's decay. Giangastone remained self-aware enough to mock court rituals. He renamed his troupe of ruspanti after ancient statesmen and turned formal audiences into farces. Within this crumbling duke lurked a man who understood both the absurdity of his position and the inevitability of his house's extinction. The powers of Europe watch and wait. Giangastone has no heirs. The Medici line is ending. Who will get Tuscany? The European powers don't even wait for him to die. In 1735, a preliminary peace agreement assigns Tuscany to Francis Stephen of Lorraine, husband of Maria Theresa of Austria. It's already decided. The Medici are irrelevant. Giangastone dies on July 9th, 1737. He's the last male Medici. The dynasty that began with Giovanni de' Medici in 1397, that survived exile and conspiracy and plague and war, that produced 4 popes and countless cardinals and dukes, ends with a fat, drunk man dying alone in a palace. But there's one Medici left. Anna Maria Luisa de' Medici, Giangastone's sister, survives him by 6 years. She's elderly, childless, the last of her line. She owns nothing. The Grand Duchy passes to the Lorraines. But she has one thing: the family's art collection. Everything, the galleries of the Uffizi, the treasures of the Palazzo Pitti, the statues, the paintings, the manuscripts, the jewels, centuries of accumulated beauty, purchased with usury money and embezzlement and stolen tax revenue, laundered through chapels and churches, the physical manifestation of the Medici myth. Anna Maria Luisa could sell it, scatter it across Europe. She could liquidate the collection to secure her own independent fortune, leaving the incoming Lorraines with empty palaces and bare walls. Instead, on October 31st, 1737, she signs the Patto di Famiglia, the family pact. It's a legal document, witnessed and binding. It states that the entire artistic patrimony of the Medici, every painting, every statue, every gem, must remain in Florence forever. It can never be removed, never be sold, never be divided. The treasures of the Medici, centuries of art, of meticulous and conscious effort to elevate a peasant bloodline piece by piece to something far greater, beyond village medics, beyond street moneylenders, beyond bankers. All of it bequeathed to Florence for the ornament of the state, for the utility of the public, and to attract the curiosity of foreigners. It's the final transformation, the ultimate Medici move. Giovanni de' Medici started by hoarding gold and hiding wealth. Anna Maria Luisa ends by giving it all away, and in doing so, makes the family immortal. She dies on February 18th, 1743. She's buried in the Medici Chapel at San Lorenzo in the massive, opulent, unfinished mausoleum that the Grand Dukes built to proclaim their greatness. The dynasty is extinct, the bloodline is over, but the city they forged in their image remains. Walk through Florence today. Look up at the Duomo's dome, built with Medici money. Walk through the Uffizi, filled with Medici treasures. Visit San Lorenzo, where Lorenzo the Magnificent and his brother Giuliano rests underneath a statue of the Madonna and Child, carved by Michelangelo. Stand in the Piazza della Signoria, where the Pazzi conspirators were hanged, where Savonarola was burned, where the Republic fell and rose and fell again. The Medici are everywhere. They own the city still, not through power, but through memory. So what do we make of them? The Medici destroyed the Florentine Republic. They rigged elections, exiled opponents, embezzled public funds. They murdered rivals, sometimes openly, sometimes quietly. They turned citizens into subjects, liberty into servitude. But they also built the Renaissance. Without Medici money, Brunelleschi might not have finished the Duomo's dome. Donatello might not have cast his David. Botticelli might have remained an obscure workshop apprentice. Michelangelo might never have sculpted the Pietà. The Platonic Academy might not have translated Plato. The humanist movement might have withered. The Medici understood that culture is power, beauty is legitimacy. If you can control what people see, what they admire, what they aspire to, you control them more effectively than any army. Giovanni de Medici started with usury, a mortal sin, punishable by eternal fire, according to Dante. His descendants ended with the Uffizi, eternal beauty admired by millions. They laundered their crimes through chapels. They turned guilt into gold, gold into art, art into legacy. Machiavelli, who watched the Medici rise and fall and rise again, who suffered under them and courted them and analysed them, understood this. In his Florentine histories, he wrote that Lorenzo the Magnificent was a man who understood the forms and structures of power, not just the reality of power. Anyone can seize control through violence, but the form of it, the appearance, the performance. The Medici were always performing. Cosimo the Elder, dressing plainly and acting uninterested in politics while controlling everything. Lorenzo the Magnificent, singing carnival songs and courting the greatest minds while destroying the Constitution and neglecting the family bank. Leo X, hunting in papal boots while the Reformation ignited. Catherine de Medici, orchestrating massacres and hosting festivals in Paris while civil war raged. Even Gian Gastone, pathetic and drunk, scrambling to undo his father's disastrous policies, surrounded by his Ruspanti, was performing a final, grotesque parody of Medici splendor. And it worked. We remember them not as tyrants, but as patrons, not as embezzlers, but as visionaries, not as the destroyers of Republican liberty, but as the fathers of the Renaissance. Their propaganda outlived them. The frescoes remain, the statues endure, the buildings stand. When you visit Florence, you don't tour the ruins of a destroyed republic. You tour the Medici city, the one they built, the one they imagined, the one they left behind. Anna Maria Luisa's Patto di Famiglia ensured it. By giving away everything, she made the Medici immortal. So the paradox remains. Can you build a golden age on a foundation of crime? Can beauty redeem corruption? Does the end, centuries of artistic achievement, justify the means, the death of liberty? The bank is gone, the dynasty is extinct, but the beauty remains. And in a city where every street corner bears their mark, the Medici still rule Florence, not as bankers, not as grand dukes, as ghosts. Ghosts made of marble and gold. Ghosts that will never die. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the rise and fall of the House of Medici. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It really is the best way to support the channel. And if you're not ready to leave Florence just yet, I recommend watching my video on Dante Alighieri next. Thanks for watching.